Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Marissa Adams, and I'm the Marketing Manager here at Trace. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll answer as many as we can at the end during Q&A. To get us started, I wanted to introduce our company and give some background on our expertise in information security. TraceSecurity LLC, a leading provider of cybersecurity and compliance solutions, celebrated 17 years in business this year. Our company was founded in February 2004 as one of the first technology companies to incubate in the Louisiana Technology Park. Our company's mission at its founding was simple: to help banks and credit unions protect their customer and member information and comply with GLBA, FFIEC, and NCUA requirements. Since then, TraceSecurity has served over 3,000 organizations across the United States, spanning industries including financial services, healthcare, government, energy, legal, technology, education, manufacturing, and more. We have established many partnerships, most notably our strategic alliance with CUNA, the Credit Union National Association, which positions us as their exclusive provider of cybersecurity and compliance services. This partnership also includes endorsement from over 20 credit union leagues in the U.S. TraceSecurity offers a comprehensive portfolio of solutions that allow organizations to manage their information security program, which includes IT risk assessments and audits, social engineering, penetration testing, security training, and more. At this time, I would like to turn things over to my colleagues Colette Burke and Mitchell Bearry to speak on our expertise relating to ransomware.
My name is Colette Burke. I manage a team of Information Security Analysts as well as our software support department. Before coming to TraceSecurity, I worked in education technology, managing the computer help desk of one of the United States' first established one-to-one laptop programs. Now I oversee a team performing social engineering, vulnerability assessments, and penetration testing services, and I work with Trace's leadership team to develop and refine those services for our current and future customers' benefit. With that experience under my belt, I want to dive into the particular threat of ransomware with you all and discuss how you and your organization can put your best foot forward in preparing for potential ransomware attacks against your business.
And my name is Mitchell Bearry. I am one of TraceSecurity's Information Security Analysts responsible for conducting IT audits, risk assessments, penetration tests, social engineering, and more. Prior to TraceSecurity, I received my bachelor's degree in computer science and worked as a software engineer for a leading firm of consulting engineers. I worked on the development of the Ransomware Preparedness Assessment, and I'm excited to share our knowledge when it comes to preventing, detecting, responding to, and recovering from ransomware.
As an overview of what we are planning to cover today, we will be discussing what ransomware is, including the latest breaches in the news. Then we will cover our prescribed domains for ransomware preparedness, those being prevention, detection, and response and recovery, followed by an introduction of our Ransomware Preparedness Assessment. If you have turned on the news lately, it feels like every day there is a developing story about another institution falling victim to a ransomware attack. From government agencies to school districts to insurance providers, you get the unsettling feeling that no organization is safe from being a target of these cyber intrusion attempts. TraceSecurity is here to tell you that your gut is right. Your organization could most certainly be in the crosshairs. In our experience, it's more of a matter of when, not if. You owe it to your stakeholders to prepare for the worst so that your people and your systems can perform at their best. Ransomware is a particular flavor of malware designed to encrypt or lock up any device it gains unauthorized access to. The perpetrators behind these attacks will demand a ransom of their victims, often in anonymized and hard-to-trace forms like cryptocurrency. Upon payment of this ransom, the bad actor may or may not provide the decryption key to allow the victim access to their system again. This style of attack happens again and again for several reasons. Number 1. Ransomware encryption software is neither complex to code nor expensive to obtain. Everyone from state actors on down to script kiddies can whip one up on their own or buy a piece of software on the dark web. Ransomware is an equal opportunity threat when it comes to widespread availability and popularity. Number 2, it most often relies on the weakest link of any organization, its human assets. All it takes is one user clicking on a malicious link or opening a malicious attachment to provide a bad actor the entry point they require to your internal network. Depending on account permissions or your organization's network infrastructure, the bad guy may even be able to pivot from one device to another, widening the swath of their malicious encryption. Number 3, ransomware pays big time. For a bit of effort or a small fee up front, a ransomware threat actor can set themselves up for a huge payday if they catch their victim off guard and unprepared. Other motives besides money include reputational damage and just creating havoc. Some ransomware gangs even run data leak sites where their affiliates can provide proof of stolen data as well as name and shame their ransomware victims. Turning our attention to ransomware in the news, from a fossil fuel pipeline to a meat supplier to hospitals and schools, ransomware cost victims in the United States an estimated $1.4 billion last year alone. Kaseya, a Florida-based software company that enables IT outsourcing shops to provide technology services to their customers, experienced a ransomware attack against one of their applications on Friday, July 2nd of this year. Somewhere between 800 and 1,500 entities around the globe experienced partial to full denial of service as a result of Kaseya's locked-up systems, courtesy of REvil, a prolific ransomware gang. From CPAs to dentist offices to an entire chain of supermarkets in Sweden, business operations were at a virtual standstill while Kaseya debated the pros and cons of paying $70 million to these malicious attackers. The most frustrating part is Kaseya internal security operations were actually in progress of remediating the vulnerability in their software that was the exact entry point exploited by the bad actors when the ransomware attack was introduced. This particular headline is just one example of the vulnerabilities inherent to the software supply chain, which is experiencing exponential growth in terms of attacks being levied against them. The ripple effect of one link in the supply chain being compromised is terrifying to behold, and we will be going into greater detail on supply chain risk management later in this presentation. For perspective or context, researchers indicate that REvil may only account for less than 10% of global ransomware incidents. Their long wake of destruction just from the headlines you and I have read is only the tip of the iceberg in terms of the worldwide threat that ransomware represents. Considering that not all attacks become public knowledge by a long shot, many victims who choose to simply pay the ransom, whether private citizens or organizations, will never even report the crime. In March 2021, the insurance provider CNA Financial Corp, ranked as the 7th largest commercial insurance company in the United States, sustained a ransomware attack. The Phoenix Threat Actor Group gained unauthorized access to certain CNA systems on March 5th and maintained persistence through March 21st. It was on that day that Phoenix deployed their CryptoLocker software to encrypt CNA systems, causing a network disruption and impacting corporate email. CNA paid the $40 million ransom a few weeks later in April, but systems were not fully restored until May 12th, almost 2 months after the attack commenced. Cyber researchers investigating Phoenix CryptoLocker note that it normally uses remote desktop protocol or compromised credentials to gain access to systems. It even fools users by presenting as a trustworthy software signed with a legitimate digital certificate. In CNA's case, the entry point was actually an infected browser update on a compromised website that Phoenix was able to entice an end user into downloading. In the wake of the attack, CNA's forensic analysis led them to notify stakeholders in July 2021 that 75,000 individuals' data may have been compromised as the Phoenix gang performed data exfiltration of names, social security numbers, and even health benefits information while establishing persistence on the CNA network. And so, after weeks of being under attack, months of disruption of systems, and a jaw-dropping ransom payment, what does CNA have to show for it? They've got the 24 months of free credit monitoring they are having to provide these current and former employees, as well as the reputation damage that a data breach can inflict on an organization in the public eye. With these cases as a cautionary tale, we want to dive into our research and experience as a cybersecurity provider to enable you with the knowledge and strategy you need to prepare your organization against the threat of ransomware. Our first domain of preparedness techniques falls under the category of prevention. Prevention is the first order of the day when it comes to ransomware preparedness. These ransomware prevention tactics and governing principles can serve as a playbook for your organization to shore up your defenses so that a ransomware perpetrator cannot gain a foothold in service of their attack. What is the number one most important prevention measure that you should put in place that could neutralize the most catastrophic consequences of a ransomware attack? In other words, what is a procedure that your organization can develop now which could make or break your ransomware response on the day that matters most? At TraceSecurity, we believe the foundation of your ransomware preparedness program is your backups. If a ransomware threat actor is able to access and encrypt your production systems, whether they be workstations or servers or other important applications, you want to know that your information will be safe and accessible in another place. This means following the 3-2-1 backup rule. Maintain 3 copies of your data, keep your data on at least 2 types of storage media, and store at least one of these backups off-site in a secure location. We cannot stress enough when it comes to the threat of ransomware, the strength of your backups boils down to their complete isolation from your production systems. Ransomware threat actors, when afforded the opportunity to lock up the primary copies of your data, will stop at nothing to corrupt your backups as well. And for your organization, without access to up-to-date and uncorrupted backups of your systems, your ransomware response is hamstrung from the start. My colleague Mitchell will go into greater detail on backups as a part of the response and recovery domain later in this presentation. However, I wanted to introduce it as a part of prevention due to the preparation necessary to plan and implement a robust backup program. Next up, we will talk about some software concerns as a part of your prevention tactics. To prevent unauthorized access to your networks and systems, some steps your technical team can take fall under system hardening and software updating measures. With all the possible managed devices that fall under your organization's purview, you're going to want a vulnerability management program that scans those devices for known vulnerabilities and gives you the structure to prioritize and remediate those vulnerabilities to reduce your overall risk. In a similar vein, patch management procedures are going to provide your team with the framework to apply software updates in an organized and vetted fashion. By taking these vulnerabilities and out-of-date software off the table, you are reducing the attack surface for a ransomware perpetrator, giving them fewer and fewer footholds in their uphill climb to gain unauthorized access to your systems. While we're on the topic of infrastructure, we also want to stress the importance of documented approved data flows, paying special attention to network segmentation. A properly segmented network with security zones and access controls could be the saving grace against ransomware software spreading from system to system. You should have a strong grasp on the access permissions assigned to your users, abiding by the principles of least privilege as well as separation of duties. Every level of permission should be structured to give as little power as possible to a ransomware threat actor potentially compromising that account. In a similar vein, your organization will want to audit any file share permissions in place and lock down any connections that are no longer needed or can be replaced by other, more secure means of communication. Remote desktop protocol also represents a crucial entry point for the enterprising ransomware actor, with some industry professionals colloquially referring to it as the ransomware deployment protocol. In 2020, RDP was the initial attack vector in 50% of ransomware deployment cases, and while in 2021, RDP accounted for 30% of total ransomware exposures, that's still more than double the next most common exposure. All of these facts mean your organization needs to stay on top of IT best practices for configuring and authenticating to this protocol, especially as businesses continue to navigate the remote work landscape. If there's one thing we've learned from current events in ransomware attacks, we need to pay particular attention to the supply chain and how your organization depends on third-party vendors and managed service providers. Compromises like SolarWinds or Kaseya are only predictable in their eventuality. Anyone can and will be a target of ransomware or other malicious threats. You can insulate your organization from this threat by maintaining an effective vendor management program, conducting due diligence on prospective vendors, verifying business continuity plans for existing vendors, and maintaining detailed logs and monitoring over your vendor's activity on your network are all essential parts of making sure your organization does not fall victim to the same level of attack your vendors can and do face in this day and age. One of the strongest ways you can prepare your organization for an attempted ransomware intrusion is not at the application level or at the infrastructure level, but at something much more nuanced and tricky to manage, the human level. The people who work for your organization can be both your strongest asset, but also your weakest link in the armor that is your information security program. All it takes is one unsuspecting employee clicking on a phishing link or downloading a malicious attachment to open up the system access a ransomware attacker needs to encrypt your organization's important data. That is why security awareness training, as well as phishing simulation testing, are the key to educating your employees on the latest and greatest threats, appealing to different learning styles, as well as experience levels, to get everyone on the same page. Employees should receive feedback upon completing a phishing test, either recognizing them for their correct handling of the perceived threat, or providing them remedial training to help them avoid phishing attacks in the future. You should also make sure to educate your employees on the importance of strong and unique passwords, as well as the use of multi-factor authentication as an extra layer of protection for their user accounts. Alongside your remote social engineering training regimen, your organization's anti-spam and anti-phishing filtering systems should provide a strong line of defense protecting your employees from the outside. Implementing SPF in conjunction with DMARC can help to stop email spoofing right in its tracks. Authenticating email sender addresses can also be accomplished through DKIM by comparing digital signatures to organization DNS records. For your web environment, you can put in place secure DNS to protect your systems from DNS cache poisoning. In addition, you may want to implement one or more forms of content filtering to cover your bases in terms of the internet browsing that your employees are bound to conduct throughout the business day. All of these technical controls can filter out the worst threats that ransomware attackers put out there, thereby allowing your employees to put their best foot forward in their security awareness. While this is not an exhaustive list of all preventative measures against ransomware attack vectors, TraceSecurity believes this is a good start to assess your organization's readiness in this arena. Next up, my colleague Mitchell will be speaking on the next domain of preparedness in our view, which is detection.
The second step in preparing for a ransomware attack is detection. If you are unable to prevent the attack from occurring, the next best option is to have the means to quickly and efficiently learn of its existence so that measures can be implemented to stop it in its tracks before any further damage is caused. The period of time between the point at which ransomware infects a device and the time at which it can spread throughout the rest of your network is extremely fast. Unless you have a dedicated SOC team watching your network 24/7, your only hope of detecting and stopping it before too much damage is done is through the use of automated solutions. Software such as an IDS or IPS, endpoint protection solution, anti-malware software, content and spam filtering, SIM solutions, and other similar applications have the capabilities necessary to first detect and then block, quarantine, isolate, or stop potential attacks before they fully infest your network. However, no single solution is completely adequate to secure your network and detect ransomware. As previously mentioned with SolarWinds and Kaseya, even the companies hosting these security solutions can be affected by malware. As a result, the principle of defense in depth, or layered security as it is sometimes called, comes into play here. By employing multiple brands of different types of solutions, you can help mitigate the risk of one of the applications missing a potential attack. In the case of the security software itself being compromised, retaining multiple solutions from different vendors will allow them to scan each other to detect if a portion of your shield against this threat becomes infected. In addition to these solutions, there are other applications available which may indirectly aid in detecting a potential ransomware attack. The first of these is integrity checking and file monitoring software. This is software capable of analyzing the hashes of installed programs to determine if they were modified during download, and that check firmware and other information to verify their legitimacy. If the hash of the program listed on the company's website is different than the hash of the program after it was downloaded, then the software was likely intercepted by an attacker and modified to be malicious before being passed on. Using a SIM solution or IDS, you could then even potentially trace the source of the interference and determine the attack vector responsible. File monitoring software will allow for auditing of the network and can generate alerts if any file or folder is accessed by a user who does not have the necessary permissions. This can help determine if ransomware is trying to install itself on the network or alter the contents of files on a device. A performance and capacity monitoring solution can also be used to detect a potential attack. Normally used to check on the health of your devices, these solutions could also allow you to see if the CPU, memory, disk usage, and other factors are showing a sudden spike or increase in utilization that may be indicative of an attack. Monitoring systems using this method will allow you to check for ransomware attacks as well as other forms of malware. Finally, a software inventory can aid in quickly learning of ransomware that is already on your devices. Through constant scans of all devices on the network, the solution can determine if any applications or software that are not allowed on certain devices have been downloaded and/or installed, and alert the appropriate response personnel of this information. While all of these automatic solutions to detect malware can be very helpful, the most proactive way to stop a ransomware attack will always be effective security practices by employees. At the end of the day, it is the human aspect that will be targeted by ransomware threat actors the most, since we are the weakest link in any organization. PurpleSec, a website that compiles cybersecurity statistics, found that 21% of ransomware attacks have involved a social aspect such as phishing. Ensuring that your employees are well trained in spotting and reporting suspicious emails, phone calls, visitors, websites, and other common attack vectors is important when detecting the source from which ransomware could occur. No one checked the identification of the service technician. Was he really from AT&T? And are you sure the link in the email you received is really from the CEO? Being able to notice and properly report anything that might be out of the ordinary will help to detect a ransomware attack while it is still in its infancy of affecting your network. That is why cybersecurity awareness for employees is so highly stressed in all of TraceSecurity's services. Any publicly available information that you can find, an attacker can also find and then use to their advantage. This information can be used to craft the perfect phishing email with a link to unknowingly download ransomware onto the company network, or to put together a disguise to wear before entering the building and claiming to be from Fiserv. While you cannot 100% guarantee that all of your employees will detect dangerous actions, by conducting cybersecurity awareness training and tests such as phishing, vishing, and on-site social engineering campaigns, you will be able to ensure that everything possible is being done to properly train even the most computer illiterate individuals. And perhaps more important than the recognition of the threat, you must also train your employees on the follow-through, aka clear incident reporting guidelines to ensure that potential breaches or compromises are elevated to the necessary personnel as soon as humanly possible. We hope these pieces of advice help to hone your organization's incident detection practices as they relate to ransomware threats. Next up, I will be presenting the final domain of preparedness in our view, which is response and recovery. Here is where things have taken a turn for the worse. An attacker was able to circumvent your prevention solutions and has breached the network. Due to further actions by this party, or misconfiguration internally, your detection solutions did not alert you in time in order to fully secure your organization against the attack and purge your systems of this threat actor's presence. Your fears have finally come true, and there is indeed a ransomware payload deployed on your network, locking down your computers, encrypting the data, and demanding a large number of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency as payment to decrypt your files. If such a scenario occurs so as to render your prevention and detection solutions moot, the next phase to implement is response and recovery. This section focuses on how to recover your files and prevent further damage. Your response to a ransomware attack is just as critical as your preparation beforehand. Make the wrong choice, and you could cause even more harm to the network than the attackers did. If some of the following controls are in place, it can help ensure recovery of any lost data and negate the need to pay the ransom entirely. The first step to establishing a solid chance for recovery of your data is through backups. As previously discussed, all necessary data should be backed up, whether that is from critical systems like servers, shared drives, network device configurations, or other devices. Workstations should also be backed up if employees are storing sensitive information locally. For the critical systems, a regular, complete backup of the entire device, including the operating system, applications, settings, and all other necessary data should be done. All of these backups should be encrypted, stored either off-site or in the cloud, and tested at least monthly to ensure that file restoration is working properly. With good processes in place, you can know that in the event of a ransomware attack, it would be relatively simple to isolate the affected devices, do a complete wipe, and restore the entire system from scratch. In addition to the restoration of your systems from an attack and the purging of the ransomware software from your network, you should also be investigating the attack to determine how it was carried out. Additional factors, such as the systems affected, the vulnerabilities exploited, and the accounts compromised are just some of the ways in which you can identify the source of the intrusion and plug the hole to ensure the attackers cannot use the same vector again. It is important to realize that if ransomware gangs get in once, as soon as you pay the ransom and they decrypt your files, they can and will attempt another incursion. Their logic is, if you've paid once, there's a good chance you'll pay again. According to CBS News, a study from CyberReason states that 80% of ransomware victims are hit with a repeat attack. That is why it is critical to patch the system or vulnerability used by the bad actors to get in the first time. If they decide to attack again, then they will have to find a new way to leverage the systems, which buys your network team more time to fully secure your devices. In order to make certain that this restoration process can be performed in adequate time and using cost-effective resources, a few documents should be established to define the standards and track the entire process. An incident response plan should be present to outline the steps for event response, from the moment the attack is detected all the way to when reports are written. Additionally, each of these steps should be documented in their application, so lessons learned from these incidents can be used to update the plan. A disaster recovery plan encompasses the more general recovery requirements, such as communication procedures, specific recovery procedures for ransomware, and cybersecurity insurance. Contact information for authorized response personnel should also be included, such as the internal response teams, law enforcement, regulators, and all other associated third parties that may need to be notified following a ransomware attack. Finally, the objectives for the resumption of business operations should be defined either within the disaster recovery plan or in a separate document, such as a business impact analysis. Examples of these factors can include recovery time objectives, recovery point objectives, maximum allowable downtime, dependencies of systems, and essential personnel to perform the recovery. However, these guidelines in theory are only useful if they work in practice, and that is where disaster recovery testing comes in. A variety of tests exist to help determine the program's effectiveness. Testing both full restores as well as file restoration from backups guarantee that the organization has the ability to recover all data encrypted by a ransomware attack. Core processor failover tests are used to see if the business can remain operational at an alternate site following an attack. It is important that in the event your RTO or RPO is not met during mitigation of a ransomware attack at the primary location, that an alternate site is in place that can run the core functions of the organization until the main location is brought back online. Tabletop exercises are the best way to test an organization's response to a ransomware attack and to see if you are truly prepared on all organizational levels. By running through a ransomware scenario with upper management and any other involved third parties, you will know if the procedures outlined in the incident response plan and disaster recovery plan actually work, and whether the RTO and RPO can be feasibly satisfied. Lessons learned from these tests are necessary to update the response plans. As ransomware gangs become more sophisticated and update their own methods of attack, you also need to improve your own controls in place to respond to them. Another method that can be used to reduce the damage done by a ransomware attack is through cybersecurity insurance. Given the prevalence and efficiency of ransomware in use today, cyber insurance that specifically covers ransomware can be extremely expensive. However, if you are not able to afford the appropriate prevention, detection, and other solutions to keep attackers at bay, this may serve as a partial substitute and help compensate for a deficiency in other controls. Ransomware insurance coverage can help reduce the financial burden of paying a ransom to recover locked-up systems. It can also help to cover the cost of data restoration and or dealing with stolen or leaked data from a public relations perspective. Make sure to read your policy coverage with a fine-tooth comb and understand exactly what will or will not be covered in the event of a ransomware attack. We hope this information has been helpful in exploring the critical importance of response and recovery in the unfortunate event of a ransomware compromise. Now we would like to zoom out a bit and discuss a solution which can bring all of these domains together in a constructive and eye-opening opportunity for your organization. I'm going to hand it back to my colleague Colette to introduce TraceSecurity's upcoming assessment offering.
Now, I know that was a lot of information to take in regarding all the nuance that is involved in a multi-layer ransomware defense. From the recommended configurations to your security devices to trusted software providers, TraceSecurity understands that it can be a lot to keep track of. Some organizations may be overwhelmed and not even know where to start. That is why we have developed the Ransomware Preparedness Assessment as a security service to enable you with the best practices and industry expertise to assess where your organization stands currently and where your points of improvement lie, which will more effectively strengthen your organization's security posture against this rising threat. The Ransomware Preparedness Assessment consists of two complementary branches of inquiry. The first is an in-depth evaluation of technical and personnel and application controls to ensure they are effectively implemented against the ransomware threat. Our trained information security analysts will interview your information security stakeholders and review evidence of control implementation to provide recommendations customized to your organization's exact needs. The second part of the assessment is a configuration best practices scan of your organization's devices using our trusted Qualys authenticated scanning platform. This best practices configuration set has been optimized to test the most common device settings and vulnerabilities, which are known ransomware attack vectors or entry points. The control audit plus the configuration best practices results will be combined seamlessly into one assessment report, providing your organization with actionable recommendations on a variety of factors building into your ransomware defense program. Both branches of the assessment are designed to flex or contract depending on your organization's particular needs, regardless of your industry. Let TraceSecurity leverage our decades of information security experience, along with our up-to-the-minute research on the latest threats, to provide the watchful third-party eye over your security plan. You never know, it might just be the difference between your business continuing uninterrupted versus your organization ending up as front-page ransomware news. As we bring our prepared remarks to a close, what are the important milestones on the path for your organization to effectively prepare for a ransomware attack? TraceSecurity's prescribed domains for ransomware preparedness provide the interrelated structure that your organization can benefit from. Depending on your particular organizational processes, these functional areas may bleed together somewhat in practical application, but the best practices supporting these areas remain essential nonetheless. You have your prevention measures, which should help keep ransomware attackers on the outside of your business's defenses where they belong, paying special attention to employee training and awareness. You should also invest in multi-layered detection methods to monitor and report on unusual device or network activity. Last but not least, your organization's response and recovery plans should encompass your backup conducting, testing, and restoring. In this regard, your organization would be able to bounce back from a ransomware incursion with minimal costly downtime. If you want to learn more about how your organization measures up to these best practices and recommendations, contact TraceSecurity to set up your ransomware preparedness assessment soon.